Listen carefully because what I'm about to say might make you uncomfortable in a way you can't ignore. Have you ever felt that silence from her wasn't empty, but heavy? Like something unspoken was sitting between you and her, watching you try to understand. That quiet isn't distance, it's pressure. And if you're feeling it, it means something about you is reaching her deeper than words ever could. Before we go further, subscribe and like this video, because what you're about to learn will change how you see every quiet moment from now on. You see, most men panic when a woman goes quiet. They assume she's losing interest, pulling away, or testing them. And that fear makes them chase, overthink, and eventually destroy the very connection they were trying to protect. But what if I told you her silence is often the opposite? What if her quiet is where her emotions become too intense to express safely? Women don't always withdraw when they feel less. Sometimes they withdraw because they feel too much. Think about it. When a woman doesn't care, she becomes easy, predictable, even indifferent. But when you matter, her mind becomes a storm she doesn't know how to show you. She analyzes your words, replays your tone, questions her own reactions, and suddenly silence feels safer than saying the wrong thing. That quiet you're afraid of is actually her protecting something fragile, not from you, but for you. And here's the part no one tells you. If you react to her silence with insecurity, you confirm her fear that you can't handle her depth. But if you stay grounded, calm, and emotionally steady, you become the one place she doesn't have to hide. Her quiet then turns into trust, slowly, subtly, almost invisibly. So right now, instead of asking why she's quiet, ask yourself what she might be feeling that words would expose. Because the truth is, silence is rarely empty. And when it comes from her, it's often full of something you've only begun to understand. Don't rush to break it. Learn to read it. Because in that quiet, she's already telling you exactly how much you matter. And if you miss that message, you won't just lose her. You'll lose the rare chance to be understood by someone who chose silence instead of pretending she didn't feel anything. When a woman is quiet, most men make the same mistake. They fill the silence with their own fears instead of observing it with awareness. They start interpreting her lack of words as rejection, when in reality, silence is often a space where emotions are being processed rather than expressed. You need to understand something fundamental about emotional behavior. Not everyone communicates feelings in real time. Some people need distance to organize what they feel before they can safely translate it into words. If she matters to you, her silence will not feel neutral. It will feel charged, noticeable, even slightly uncomfortable. That discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is real. People who don't care rarely create emotional tension. They don't linger in your thoughts, and they don't require interpretation. But when a woman becomes quiet in a way that you can feel, it means your presence has registered beyond surface level. You are no longer just someone she talks to casually. You have entered the space where emotions are active, not passive. At this point, your behavior becomes the defining factor. If you chase her silence with constant messages, questions, or need for reassurance, you shift the dynamic from connection to pressure. And pressure makes people retreat further into silence. But if you remain composed, responsive rather than reactive, you communicate something far more powerful than words. You communicate emotional stability. And emotional stability is one of the rarest and most attractive signals in any relationship dynamic. Her quiet moments are not gaps to be filled. They are signals to be interpreted. She may be thinking about how she feels about you, how safe she feels, or how much she allows herself to invest. These are not surface-level thoughts. These are internal negotiations that require time. When a woman is quiet, she is not necessarily pulling away. She may be deciding whether to lean in more. Your role is not to interrupt that process. Your role is to demonstrate, through your consistency and energy, that being close to you does not require her to hide, perform, or rush her emotions. When she senses that, her silence begins to soften naturally. And what replaces it is not just conversation, but comfort. There is a deeper layer to her silence that most men never consider. Quiet is not always about withdrawing from you. Sometimes it's about protecting how she shows up in your presence. When a woman begins to feel something genuine, she becomes more aware of how she is perceived. Her silence can be a moment of recalibration, where she is aligning her emotions with how she wants to express them without losing control of herself. This is why you may notice her being more reserved after moments of closeness. It is not distance for the sake of pushing you away. It is often her trying to regain balance. Emotional intensity can feel overwhelming, especially if she senses that what she feels is growing faster than she expected. Silence becomes her way of slowing things down internally, even if nothing has changed externally. If you respond to this by demanding clarity too soon, you interrupt her internal process. She may not be ready to articulate what she is still understanding herself. And when a person feels pressured to explain emotions they have not fully processed, they often withdraw further. Not because they lack interest, but because they need space to think without being evaluated. You must learn to recognize the difference between disinterest and internal processing. Disinterest feels cold, consistent, and detached. Silence that comes from processing feels thoughtful, slightly inconsistent, and emotionally charged beneath the surface. It may come and go, not because she is unsure of you, but because she is navigating her own reactions to you. In these moments, your steadiness becomes the anchor. You do not need to overperform, over-explain, or attempt to fix her silence. Instead, you maintain a presence that is open, calm, and unaffected by temporary pauses. That communicates that you are not dependent on constant validation and that you are comfortable with emotional pacing. When a woman senses that she can take her time without losing your attention or respect, her silence begins to transform. It becomes less about protection and more about comfort. She no longer needs to hide her thoughts to feel safe. And when that shift happens, her quiet presence often turns into deeper engagement, because she no longer feels the need to guard what she is beginning to trust. There is a subtle truth about attraction that most men overlook. A woman's silence can actually intensify her awareness of you. When she is quiet, she is not distracted by surface-level conversation, which means her mind has more space to reflect on her experience with you. Every interaction you've had begins to echo internally. Your tone, your consistency, your reactions, all of it gets processed in a deeper way than in casual back-and-forth communication. This is why silence can sometimes feel different from normal conversation. It is not absence, it is incubation. In that quiet space, she may be evaluating how she feels around you, whether she feels emotionally secure, and whether your presence adds something meaningful to her life. These are not conscious checklists she openly shares, but rather subtle emotional impressions forming beneath awareness. If you panic during this phase, you disrupt that natural evaluation. When you start seeking reassurance or trying to break the silence too aggressively, you shift her focus away from her internal experience and onto managing your reaction. That creates pressure, and pressure reduces emotional openness. Instead of moving closer, she may retreat to regain a sense of control over her own pace. The men who understand this dynamic do something very different. They allow the silence to exist without trying to dominate it. They continue living their own lives, maintaining their direction, and staying consistent in their behavior. This signals that their identity is not dependent on constant communication. And that independence is psychologically attractive because it creates a contrast between stability and neediness. Her quiet moments then begin to feel safe rather than uncertain. She realizes that her silence does not threaten the connection. It exists alongside it. And when silence is no longer interpreted as danger, it becomes a space where deeper feelings can form naturally. At that point, she doesn't feel rushed to explain herself. She doesn't feel judged for taking time. Instead, she feels understood without having to perform understanding. And that is when her silence starts to soften into something more expressive. Not because she was forced to speak, but because she felt secure enough to want to. One of the most overlooked aspects of a woman's quiet behavior is that it often reflects emotional safety rather than emotional absence. When a woman feels guarded, she may either become overly expressive or completely withdrawn. But when she begins to feel safe, her communication naturally becomes more selective. She no longer feels the need to fill every moment with words, because silence itself no longer feels threatening. This is where many men misinterpret the situation. They assume that less communication means less interest, when in reality, the quality of emotional connection is what determines the need for constant expression. When a connection is shallow, people rely on frequent interaction to maintain it. When a connection feels meaningful, silence can exist without weakening the bond. Her quietness can be a reflection of trust developing at a deeper level. She is not trying to entertain, impress, or maintain a surface-level exchange. Instead, she is allowing herself to exist more naturally in the connection. This often includes moments of introspection, where she is simply processing her thoughts without needing to share them immediately. If you respond to this by creating unnecessary tension, such as over-analyzing her every pause or questioning her intentions repeatedly, you introduce instability into something that was beginning to feel stable. Emotional safety requires consistency, not interrogation. The more predictable and grounded your behavior is, the easier it becomes for her to remain open without feeling the need to protect herself through silence. It's important to recognize that her quiet moments are not something you need to fix. They are something you need to respect. In doing so, you communicate maturity, patience, and emotional intelligence. These qualities are far more influential than constant reassurance or attention-seeking behavior. When she experiences your ability to remain calm in the presence of silence, it changes how she perceives the connection. You become someone who does not react impulsively to emotional fluctuations. Instead, you respond with stability. And stability is what allows deeper emotional investment to grow without fear. Over time, her silence becomes less frequent, not because you demanded more communication, but because she no longer feels the need to hide her thoughts. She begins to share more naturally, not out of obligation, but out of comfort. And that shift is where genuine connection starts to strengthen. At this point, you need to understand something most men never fully grasp. Her silence is not something you win against, and it's not something you chase until it disappears. It's something you learn to coexist with while maintaining your own emotional center. Because the real test is not whether she speaks constantly, but whether you can remain composed when she doesn't. When a woman is quiet, she is giving you a window into how she processes connection. And how you handle that window reveals who you are at a deeper level. If you react with anxiety, urgency, or pressure, you signal that your stability depends on her behavior. But if you remain grounded, continue your routines, and interact without emotional dependency, you show that your value is not negotiated through silence or conversation. This changes the dynamic in a powerful way. She no longer feels like she has to manage your emotions while managing her own. Instead, she experiences you as someone who adds calm rather than complexity. And that perception is what allows her to lower her guard over time. Her quiet moments begin to evolve. What once felt like distance becomes familiarity. What once felt uncertain becomes predictable in a reassuring way. She starts to associate your presence with a sense of ease, where she can think, feel, and return without fear of losing the connection. But remember, this only works if you do not abandon yourself in the process. Your purpose, your discipline, your direction in life must remain intact, regardless of her communication patterns. A man who stays centered does not become consumed by waiting. He continues moving forward, and that movement itself reinforces his emotional independence. In that state, silence loses its power to create confusion. Instead, it becomes just another part of interaction, not something that defines it. And ironically, when silence no longer affects you negatively, it often begins to disappear on its own. Not because you demanded more, but because your presence made it unnecessary. So when she goes quiet, don't rush to fill the gap. Don't assume the worst. Observe, remain steady, and understand that what you are experiencing is not rejection, but a form of communication that requires patience to interpret. Because in many cases, the quieter she becomes, the more she is actually processing how much you matter, and whether what she feels is something she is ready to let grow.